thank you. Thank you so much to our amazing sponsors. We see you and we see that you see us. So thank you so much for joining us and allowing this conversation to go global. Really just appreciate that. So thanks again to all of our sponsors of the Nonprofit Show. Patrick, thank you so much. CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. And if you haven't checked out the full website, I highly recommend that you do that at AmericanNonprofitAcademy.com. This is me, Jarrett Ransom, the co-host of the show, also known as the Nonprofit Nerd there with the taped up glasses, CEO of the Raven Group. And today we are so thrilled Daniel Openden is joining us, President and CEO of SARRC. SARRC stands for Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, we are thrilled to have you here. And one of the reasons I know that we've interrupted some private time with your family and you're coming to us from a hideaway in the Pines. But I really wanted to chat with you and have you share your experience of the Here For You virtual community breakfast. In full disclosure, it's an event that I've been attending more than 20 years. And I know that you are a client and have been a client of Terry Axelrod's Benavon. So some of the things that you've done really originated from that community breakfast concept. But talk to me about how in the middle of this pandemic, you had to take a massive event and turn it virtually overnight.
Sure. Yeah. So the SARRC breakfast, this would have been our 23rd annual community breakfast. It is one of the largest nonprofit events in our community. Usually has somewhere between 14 and 1,800 people that attend. And most of those are not directly connected to autism. These are legislators, they're educators, they're business leaders, and it has become one of these events that people really look forward to coming to annually, just to kind of see the update. I kind of think of it as like a live annual report, and we've done that for a long time. But when coronavirus hit, we immediately had to cancel the breakfast. And, interestingly, we at first were not sure if we were going to do something virtual or not, if we were going to maybe look to do it again in the fall. I think it's turning out now that would have been a bad decision too, because I don't know if we'll be doing events in the fall either. And I think, for us, what really kind of kicked us into gear with the virtual is, we had already raised a lot of money from sponsors. And while our sponsors are very generous and probably would have been glad to just hand over that revenue to us for nothing, we didn't feel good about that, and we wanted to put an event together. So we quickly pivoted and decided, okay, we're going to do this virtual. We put it together in about 4 weeks, and really proud of how it all came together.
Danny, one of the things that I've always thought was interesting about the SARRC Community Breakfast is that while it's a highly produced, highly organized show, I would use the word show. One of the things that I have found so fascinating is that you always have an educational component in there where you bring in an expert from the world of autism to talk about what is going on from a scientific perspective. And I think that's interesting because a lot of us, when we think of these, community breakfasts or luncheons or even galas, we do that, tearful moment where, bless you, where we can actually elicit response on an emotional level. And what I've always been impressed with you all is that you added an intellectual component to try and motivate your donors. And I know that you had to truncate this community breakfast tremendously. Was it by almost 50% that you had to shorten?
Yeah, more than that. Our breakfast is usually, it's scheduled for an hour and a half. We plan for about an hour and 15 minutes of content. And the virtual breakfast was 26 minutes. So we shrunk it down pretty considerably because we felt like in the virtual environment, people aren't going to sit in front of their computers for too long, at least not without flipping over to their email or checking their Facebook or whatever else it is. And we want to do things that would keep people really highly engaged. And so part of that meant shrinking down the amount of time.
And so tell me how you orchestrated having a breakfast.
Yeah. So, we've always done the SARRC breakfast as a breakfast, and it's not anything too fancy. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about the funds that are being raised to go towards the mission, not the quality of the breakfast necessarily. But because it was still the breakfast, people were used to that. We partnered with a local restaurant called Oso. They're actually a microbrewery, and they are known on the weekends for just doing these outstanding breakfast burritos. And we were able to partner with them. Oso had actually just done some really great stuff with us too, and getting us hand sanitizer. They were able to make it in the breweries, and so we got 9 kegs of hand sanitizer to keep our therapists healthy and safe for our families. And then we went back to them and said, we're going to do this breakfast, and what do you think about partnering with us to offer breakfast burritos? And so they said yes. And so when you registered, you were given sort of a free opportunity to go pick up your breakfast burrito. I went down to Oso that morning and sat and watched as people pulled up and picked up their burrito and took it home. So it made it kind of fun. I mean, obviously we couldn't serve everybody, and it's not everybody picked up a burrito, but we made it kind of fun that we still kept it as a breakfast and a bit more casual than we would normally do with a plated breakfast.
Danny, this is amazing, and kudos to you and the entire team surrounding this effort. I mean, I think you hit all the points, right? The innovation, the creativity. A previous guest of ours was talking about not only the return on investment, but the return on relationship. And as you just shared that return on relationship with Oso, it was something that, you were already in engagement with them specifically for hand sanitizer, right? Like, how amazing is that? And then to carry that relationship forward, and then knowing Oso, which they're wonderful, really that community and neighborhood environment. So I just want to say hats off to you and the entire team, because it is watching it, as a constituent of yours has been truly remarkable.
It's cool. Thank you for saying that. And I think also, you hit the nail on the head, and just in terms of, the SARRC breakfast is first and foremost a fundraiser, no doubt. But it is our biggest friend raiser of the year as well. And I know that sometimes sounds a little cliche, but when we're talking about serving people with autism, we know that we can focus on the individual behaviors and skills of children, teens, and adults with autism to improve those. But we know that their outcomes are much, much better if we also engage a supportive, inclusive community around them. So much of the breakfast, yes, is raising money, but it's also about raising awareness in our community, giving people some action where they can take action and get involved and become a more inclusive, supportive community for people with autism. And part of that is Oso. I mean, 2 years ago, Oso did their own autism beer during Autism Awareness Month one year. So we've done all sorts of things without people in the community. They could become an employment partner for our adults at some point. So always looking for ways to not only raise money, but to engage our community to be supportive of people with autism.
Now, given that, how do you then, with this shortened period of time, how are you able to draw back those partners so that they get noticed or they get some sort of mention? Because that's a really tricky deal.
Yeah, you're talking about our sponsors, Julia?
But even just community partners that you might want to say, yeah, wow, they really partner with us or have a huge impact, but how do we recognize them or bring them into the community breakfast somehow?
Sure. Well, with Oso, we featured it in the breakfast with their logo pop up and a burrito on the screen. So we were able to do that. With our sponsors, what I think is interesting is that, it went out in emails that were in advance of the breakfast, but even day of, and you could still watch the breakfast on our website today. And in some ways, if you figure that our sponsors receive the visibility of the normal 1,400 to 1,800 people in the room, well, we're able to reach so many more people this way, right? We're crossing into other states. We had people dialing in from other countries. And so that visibility was really there, and it continues to be there as the breakfast continues to be watched by people. So again, part of the motivation for us to go to the virtual event was we really felt an obligation to thank, recognize, and appreciate our sponsors who are not only financial sponsors, but many of them are employment partners. They've worked with us to raise awareness out in the community. They've been advocates for us down at the legislature. So these are people that do really, really great things for us beyond just the revenue that's raised, and we really owe it to them to make sure that that we're saying thank you in the best way we can as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, you mentioned that the breakfast is still on your website. How long will that remain on your website? First question. Second question is, are you still seeing donations coming in from viewers that are continuing to watch the breakfast, or maybe existing donors and supporters that say, hey, if you missed the breakfast, it's still available, go ahead and take a look? And then are you still seeing some donations coming in based off of that presentation still being housed on your website?
Yeah, so it's a good question, because even in preparing for this, I went to go find it on our website, and it had been moved off of our homepage. So when I checked in with our marketing communications manager, she said, the goal was to leave it up there for a month. So it's still findable. It's listed under as a blog. You can still access it, link to it, watch it, etc. So it's still there, but it's not getting the prominent real estate that it was for the first month since the breakfast. And that's partly, as I understand it, wanting to keep moving forward with new content and keep things fresh. So I think that's fine. In terms of donations still coming in, yes, absolutely. In fact, yesterday we got a major gift in yesterday that came in the morning, and one that we were kind of waiting on and seeing if it was going to come in, and sure enough, it came in yesterday morning. So. And this is true even when we do the breakfast live. Oftentimes there's what we raise before the event, what we raise day of the event, and then there are often gifts that come in, weeks and months after the event as well. But I agree with you. I think that there are some benefits. I'm still sending out emails that say, hey, if you haven't seen our breakfast, here's the link to it. It's still in our signature block. So at the bottom, if you get an email from me, you'll see our breakfast theme. You can click on that. It takes you to the breakfast as well. So it's still there. It's on our YouTube channel as well. So we know it's still getting views.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, what a great way to memorialize that, right? And then also to to really continue that engagement. I love that, it stayed there for a month and then it's moved on. I do think that's actually really beautiful, but, because you do want to move on, you do want to bring in some new content, but to place that into a blog. And you have mentioned so many things that I think have been really innovative, yet so simple, right? You mentioned putting it on your website, putting it on your YouTube, and then also leaving it in your signature block. So for those of you that are watching and you're thinking, what are some best practice ways in which we can continue to share our event, our virtual event? Danny just shared, a few there that really don't cost a lot. Of course, the presentation and the video might have taken a little bit of investment, but the signature block and to memorialize that on your website is amazing. So take notes. I know that I am.
I'm going to pop up the opening slide again, because this is one of the things that I think SARRC does a really interesting and masterful job, is that every year you take and you pull up some sort of graphic message, and then you do a whole design around it, and you did your Here For You. This is not the name of the breakfast or the graphics every year. It changes up a little bit. And so I think this is what's been really intelligent. First of all, I love SARRC's graphic design and their digital presentations that they do. Something to check out, because they are really masterful at their graphics and their presentation process. But this is so interesting, Danny, because you take this concept and then you run it through. It was coming out on your e-blast, like you said, your email signature lines. You continuously hammered that. And I'm wondering how far out you started, because you only had 4 weeks for the change.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. So yeah, just to add to what you're saying, we always have a theme, and we try to build the content wherever we can around that theme for the breakfast. And actually, the original theme was different. It was not Here For You. And the Here For You theme really emerged because of our breakfast committee. who is responsible for whether it's raising sponsorships or coming up with program ideas or helping us identify table captains, communications, etc. Well, a couple of the people on our breakfast committee are parents of kids with autism who are just passionate about SARRC and the mission. And you know what we heard from them in the breakfast committee as we were deciding whether or not to do a virtual event, many of them said, in some ways the coronavirus has been really, really disruptive, but in other ways, we're seeing our kids really thrive during this time. And it's like one thing if, one person says that, but then it was 2 people, then it was 3 people, and we sort of looked around and there was some really interesting things happening here. So it was a really tough transition for most of our families. But because SARRC pivoted not just with our breakfast, but on the clinical side to continue to support families, there was this like unbelievable gratitude coming from our families that we continue to deliver our mission during very challenging times. And the theme really came from that in a time of real challenge, of real struggle, SARRC was here for you. SARRC remained here for our families and the people that we served. And so the theme emerged pretty quickly. I will tell you, when we shared it with our staff in an all-staff meeting that we had launched it was like people like erupted with joy, because I think the staff felt like as much as it was a support of how we were supporting our families, it was a nod to them, and particularly our clinical team, who was putting themselves at risk, even though we were minimizing it, to continue to deliver our mission and medically necessary treatment for our families. So the theme is something that drives all of our content, and this is one where we really took a step back and said, well, what's happening right now? And what are our families saying? What are our therapists saying? And really what it was is people just feeling grateful that SARRC had continued to deliver our mission through the coronavirus.
Amazing. Now I want to get into some technical questions, because
Sure.
One of the things that was so interesting is I used the phrase highly produced. That's been one of the hallmarks of your community breakfast. I personally think it sets the bar for the 5th largest city in America. And that's a daunting thing for you, Danny Openden, and your team to have to face every year. But this year you did something really interesting, is that even though it was a live virtual breakfast, you actually pre-recorded a lot of the segments. And I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about that.
Sure. So, a couple of things about that. When we decided to go virtual, the first thing we did is we started watching every other nonprofit virtual event that was out there. I mean, we signed up for all of them. And by the way, I should take a minute here and say that, you're treating me, Julie, like I deserve all the credit. And the credit really belongs to our Chief Development Officer, Maureen Jordan, who led us on this. And then Jerry Kendall, who is actually my predecessor, is CEO at SARRC, and kind of like the Godfather 3. Every time she tries to get out, we pull her back in. And she's remained a consultant for SARRC on all of our breakfasts. And Maureen and Jerry are really the brains behind all of this. And so the 3 of us watched lots of virtual breakfasts. And what we saw over and over again is that people tried to take what they normally do live and just switch it to a virtual format. And if I was going to give one thing that we did that was different and that we learned and that I would highly recommend for anybody else approaching virtual events, is to recognize that what you do live is not necessarily going to translate virtually. And so you talked about our breakfast and the high production value and everything else. You could kind of picture it as, kind of like a series of mini TED Talks from researchers to clinicians to parents to adults with autism. That was not going to work. People were not going to watch a bunch of, little speeches virtually and expect to maintain their attention. And we saw that in many of the virtual events that we saw leading up to the breakfast, where people tried to make that transition, and it fell flat for us. And so the idea of the video recording was for a number of reasons. One is, as you may remember, as much as it is well produced, but majority of it was people making home videos with their iPhones, right from home, families talking about the impact that SARRC had and continued to deliver for their children, teens, and adults. So we cut that together production-wise, but we actually intentionally wanted to capture this moment in time. And this moment in time was everybody at home. And so you had to make your own home videos. We didn't send a video crew into each one of these homes. We did have the video record our my speech, for example, our chairs of the breakfast, the ask, all that was more highly produced by our videographer. But then the videographer really had the responsibility of cutting together all these kind of homemade videos that were made with, again, with iPhones or smartphones, and cut them all together. And we think that that was a really good way to do it. And then going back to what you said earlier about the time, again, when we looked at some of those other virtual events, they were roughly the same amount of time as they would have been had they done them live. And we thought, God, people aren't going to stay there. In fact, when we first started, we thought we wanted to get that breakfast down to 15 minutes, and that proved impossible. So 26 was pretty good. We definitely wanted to stay under 30. But you're dealing with people's attention span. They're busy. They've got lots of distractions on their screen. I wanted to make sure that we had that as well. And then finally, I think in terms of the video, what that allowed us to do is just from a safety standpoint. We're on Zoom right now. I'm sure on somebody's computer, I'm maybe stopped or I get a little fuzzy from time to time. By putting it in a pre-recorded video, we seem to control a little bit more of what could go wrong by having it just sort of locked in. And so we launched it live, and it stayed, as we said earlier, on our website, but we thought it was a safer way to go by having a pre-recorded video and not messing so much with the live.
And I would say, as my my experience now, I didn't know that I didn't have any expectations, right? And so it didn't like really click in that it was so produced like in that way. It did seem live. It did seem obviously engaging and active, and that the donation part was active. And the time that we have left, we're almost done. I would love for you to share with us, like, what did you dial back your expectations for revenue, or where did you land? I mean, did you come ahead? What was the experience? Because it's so different from that Ben Avon community, leader ask with the envelopes at the table.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. We originally dialed back our goal from our original budgeted goal from a revenue standpoint, because we just didn't know how this was going to work. But one thing I think that we benefited from and also learned over the last few years is that, a lot of the success of these events is the revenue you raise before the event even takes place, before the actual day of and presentation and production of that event. And so because we were already raising money from sponsors and from other leadership challenge gifts, we had we had some money in the door to begin with. When we decided to go virtual, we started doing that again. So we really wanted to kind of jump out ahead as much as possible, because our theory was that the volume of gifts might be larger, particularly as people were getting it all over the place, but the amount of the gifts might be smaller, right? So you're not seeing as many people that are in the room, and you don't have that social pressure and everything else. And so we wanted to make sure that we got that out. So in terms of where we landed, we don't typically share the actual financial figures, but what I can tell you is that we end up actually netting just as much as we had originally planned in our budget, if not a little more. And part of that is because the expenses were so far down. We didn't have the hotel. We didn't have to buy breakfast for all those people. Breakfast burritos are much cheaper. So we were able to do just as well. Now, and again, I want to caution people that are thinking, oh, wow, we can do just as well. Remember, though, a lot of work was done prior to the actual event. But I will say this, that day of, one of the things you mentioned, Ben Avon model, our goal within that Ben Avon model is to try to get as many multi-year pledges in as we can. And as we do that, there's, again, a lot of prep that happens before the event, which we were already doing. But we had the second most multi-year pledges that we've ever seen at any of our breakfasts this year. So something about the virtual event really spoke to people and worked. And I think, again, a lot of it is what we did beforehand. The Ben Avon is so good at working with you to be able how to do. But a lot of it is also what resonated with people there. And I will share, this is my own opinion, anecdotal. but at the very end of the program, we kind of had these slides coming up that recognized our multi-year donors at the various different levels, interspersed with autism facts, right, about autism. And I think that as much as the work that went on before, the impact of the program, I think it was also that. It was like another reminder that we've got this multi-year giving society. We call it our MVP program, Multi-Year Visionary Partners. And seeing those names come up in the different levels, I think all of those things work together. The pre-work, the impact of the program, and then the slides at the end that kind of highlighted the various different giving levels. I think all of that contributed.
Wow. Well, I think it has a lot to do with you, Dr. Openden. Professor Rabani from Saudi Arabia just wrote in. He's like, your guest knows how to keep the audience hooked. I am just staring at my laptop. I have to say, I felt like that too, watching it. It was really compelling. And I'm so appreciative of you coming on and sharing with our industry and our sector on what worked, because I know we have a lot of competition for nonprofits and nonprofit dollars and time and attention and resources in this country. So I appreciate your honesty and integrity in sharing with so many people. I mean, we have folks from all over the world watching this, but even within our own community, this is something to behold. So, hey, this has been remarkable. Jarrett, what do you think?
Well, I just want to make sure that we mention again the website for SARRC. So maybe you can pull up Danny's contact there. And I would love for, all of us, I know I'm going to go back and watch it again. But so you said that it is on the blog. So we should look for the blog page on autismcenter.org, and sounds like it'll be up there in perpetuity. So I'm really excited to know that, and I know that so many individuals watching today live as well as the recording will want to know where they can find it. So thank you, Danny. And I wanted to say too, I recognize that you brought in your team and you elevated those around you that supported it, especially Maureen and the Godfather 3, and I can't remember the name.
Jerry Kendall.
Jerry.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. That's always a great sign of an amazing leader. So thanks for all you and your team do.
Yeah, truly my pleasure, and we couldn't do anything without him. We have an extraordinary team at SARRC in general that really they just end up making me look good most of the time, and it couldn't be done without them. And in all parts of the organization, from development to our administration to HR to finance to research to clinical, and that's what we really tried to highlight is the incredible work that they're doing with our breakfast. It is a true team effort, and we strive for excellence in all the things that we do. And I think that's what you really saw with the virtual breakfast. Even though we went to a new format, the bar was always going to remain high for us to produce a really high quality, excellent event. And I think they did a really good job of achieving that.
Well, I think what it was cool is that you were fearless in this attempt. And Jarrett and I, from the get-go, we've talked about leaning in, taking risks, understanding that things might not all work out, but this is a new day for our sector and obviously our population. And so to get ahead, to try things, to innovate, I think that donors right now have a lot of grace that they will give, and they'll understand and they want to be supportive. So now is the time to make those, take risks and make those changes, because as we become more sophisticated in this digital world, it won't be as easy to make mistakes.
That's right.
So it's an amazing thing. Hey, this is amazing. Our time is up. I want to say thank you so much to all of those that tuned in. Danny Openden, you're my hero. We want to thank our sponsors. We've got amazing sponsors that are making the nonprofit show possible. And I want to end today like I do every day. Stay well so you can do well. Thanks so much, Danny. Thanks so much, Jarrett.